Hare Krishna. A warm welcome and very good evening to this Gita Essence series. Today, we are going to discuss chapter 7. As you know, last week we covered a very important chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the first six chapter, which set the context of whole discussion. It starts with Arjuna's doubt, and then Krishna comes as an Arjuna Guru and start to clarify each doubt one at a time. Now, in this chapter 7, it's again a very important chapter and it's going to be a special topic of discussion. What's the relationship between the Lord and a human being or a living being for that matter? So, without any further due delay, I would like to invite the facilitator of this course, His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhuji, to give a discourse on this chapter number 7 and how it's important and touch each one of lives. Thank you once again, Prabhuji. And the floor.
Hare Krishna, Shikhar Prabhu. Thank you for being the host today. And thanks to all the audience who were supposed to join for today's evening program on this ongoing series of Gita Essence based on Bhagavad Gita. We recently started our sessions as per the request of audience on Zoom, but on weekends we kind of made a shift. We thought we'll do it directly live stream, so then you don't have to wait for getting a recording later on. So that's the reason we made the slight change again in our streaming option. So without further ado, it's time for us to start our session. We'll begin our discussion for today. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः नमा ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna. So starting with our discussion for today. So yesterday we completed, not yesterday, day before yesterday actually, we completed our discussion on the topic of art of meditation. That was chapter 6. So let's do a little quick recap of what we have seen in Bhagavad Gita so far. Bhagavad Gita chapter 1, it began with Arjuna's doubts, where he expressed his fear, agony, and delusion about what to do. Should I fight or not fight? Chapter 2 begins with Lord Shri Krishna responding to Arjuna's request for guidance. And Lord Shri Krishna began to speak. So, very first point, Lord Shri Krishna established in the very initial conversation on response to Arjuna is re-establishing his true identity, where Lord Shri Krishna told Arjuna, who are you or who am I? I am not this body but a spirit soul. That discussion happened. Chapter number 3, if I am a spirit soul different than the body, what am I supposed to do? I understand being a body, I'm supposed to take care of the needs of the body. Body has various needs like hunger, thirst, etc., etc. And generally, people live their whole life fulfilling the needs of the body. But now I've been told I'm not the body but a spirit soul. So, obvious question arises: how do I take care of the need of the body also? One second, just want to see if it's coming. So then in third chapter, the Karma Yoga was discussed. To establish through our karmas, through our actions, establishing our relationship with the Supreme Lord. Then chapter number 4, who is the Supreme Father and how to know Him was established. Krishna made it clear that he is different than jivas, Jiva cannot be the Supreme Lord. Jiva is a Jiva. And in this chapter, chapter 7, Krishna will establish further his relationship with the living entities. And then how do we acquire transcendental knowledge? Krishna said, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevya, approach a bona fide guru. Then in chapter 5, Lord Shri Krishna established that cultivating spiritual life is the only means to attain everlasting, eternal peace and happiness. We had discussed happiness as a byproduct of peace. And in chapter 6, Lord Shri Krishna concluded the discussion with an appeal to Arjuna. Arjuna, be a yogi, which means learn the art, practice the tips of mind and sense control so that we can access spiritual happiness by our relationship, reestablishing our relationship with the Lord. So, chapter 6 ended with this very famous verse Yoginam api sarvesham madkatenantaratmanam shraddhavam bhajate yamam same yuktatamo mata. Where Lord Shri Krishna said, Arjuna, worship me with faith, render service unto me with faith. And now Lord Shri Krishna will begin to speak from chapter number 7 how to cultivate this faith. What lacks within us is that Shraddha, is that faith to serve the Lord. We still have a lot of misgivings, doubts, attractions towards the mundane affairs. So here Lord Shri Krishna would establish, beginning with chapter 7, how we can develop that faith. And therefore Lord Shri Krishna begins to speak from chapter number 7. This is just a brief layout of how chapter 6 transitions into chapter 7 and what all will be seen in chapter 7. So we'll talk about it. Let's get into the discussion. Chapter 7 we have titled as Show Me God. Chapter number 7 to chapter number 12, Lord Shri Krishna largely speaks about himself, speak about his opulence, he speaks about his divinity, and establishes through this discussion, he being the undisputed, the supreme personality Godhead, he established the monotheistic stance of Hinduism or of Vedic culture, where there is one God, but many representatives of that supreme personality of Godhead, who we call as Devatas, like that. So let's begin our discussion for this chapter. As usual, we'll give an acronym. An acronym for this chapter is HEAR. H stands for hearing. So Lord Shri Krishna begins the seventh chapter, verse number 1, with a verse where Krishna says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Maya Saktamana Partha Yogam Yunjan Madashraya Asamshayam Samagram Mam Yatha Gnashasi Tatshunu. Arjuna, hear from me. Krishna said, now hear, O son of Pratha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So Krishna says the process of acquiring knowledge about the absolute truth is through the process of hearing. Arjuna heard directly from Krishna. How about we? How can we hear about Krishna? So, therefore, Lord Shri Krishna established the transcendental educational system, which is called as parampara, which was already discussed in the fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Evam parampara praptam. Through this, Lord Shri Krishna established a system of disseminating spiritual knowledge for all the time to come, wherein Krishna instructs a particular living entity. Let's say he instructed Brahma once, then Shiva, then there is Lakshmi, then four Kumaras, and Arjuna himself, the sun god Vivaswan also. And then they share the message as it is, without any additions and subtractions, to a qualified student who becomes qualified by not only memorizing but by living by that teaching. And then he is asked to share that wisdom with another set of students. Like that, in a relationship of qualified student and qualified teacher, the knowledge has been kept intact for generations, for millenniums. 5,000 years ago, we had already discussed in the fourth chapter when we talked about the history of Bhagavad Gita. Lord Shri Krishna spoke to Arjuna, and that same knowledge, the same meaning, the imports and the purpose of Lord Shri Krishna, which he wanted to convey to Arjuna, is available to all of us today in multiple languages through the efforts and hard work of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON. And therefore, we have this whole worldwide revolution in terms of Krishna consciousness, which wasn't there before. So, like that, Lord Shri Krishna said, hear from me or hear from my bona fide sources. But in general, let's do a little generic discussion. You know, how do we acquire knowledge about anything for that reason? And let's say, how can we acquire a perfect knowledge about the Supreme Lord? We'll just do analysis for that. Imagine right in front of your house, there's a building which is 15 or 20-year old. You want to find out who's the owner of the building, you probably would ask the neighbors, and you can go to the office, the local municipality office. You'll figure it out, whoever was the owner of it. Next to that building, imagine there's another building which is almost 100 years old. Now, the documentation may not be there, the office may not have the papers also. Now, 2 3 generations have passed by, but still you may be able to figure it out through your asking through your parents, your parents will check with the grandparents and whatnot. Now imagine just behind these two buildings, there is another building which is almost 1,000-year old. Now it becomes debatable to whom it belongs. Just like a lot of monuments in India are debatable, Lal Killa, Taj Mahal, Qutub Minar, etc., etc., which during the course of history, when invaders invaded and they captured it and they claimed it that we built it. However, there are other evidences which claims they never built it; they only looted it. Everything else was done here by the kings of this land, by the people of this land. So, anyways, it's very difficult to be reconciled. We just had a Ram Mandir issue also, which took years and decades together to resolve the conflict to whom it belongs to, like that. So, it's very difficult to figure out who was actually the owner of the building which was built 1,000 years ago. Now, look at this universe, which has been built by a creator millions, billions, and trillions of years ago. How you and I can find out factually, realistically, who is the creator of this creation? What possibility do we have? We can't have any papers about it. We can't do any hypothesis about it. Neither we can see it through our senses and acquire knowledge about it. So there are 3 ways. It is said there are 3 ways of acquiring knowledge. Beginning with Pratyaksha, Anumana, Shabda, Brahman. Aksha means eyes, Pratyaksha means to see. To see, to hear, to see and through sense perceptions, to get the knowledge. Particularly seeing is believing is what they say. Second is Anuman, hypothesis. Maybe like this, maybe like that. People make, they talk on a lot of assumptions. And third is Shabda Praman. Shabda Praman is you want to know about something, you ask an expert and they tell you what it is. For example, like a child wants to know, an infant wants to know who his father is. What that poor child can really do the research or hypothesis about it? What can he really see and figure it out? But he goes and asks the mother, or she goes and asks the mother. The mother can tell, okay, in this set, this is the father. That's it. Over. The Shabda Praman makes it very simple, however, it depends on from whom you hear. And that's the point about it. Therefore, Lord Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport to first verse, how to know Krishna? Prabhupada says, therefore, one has to learn from Krishna directly or from a pure devotee of Krishna, not from a non-devotee upstart, puffed up with academic education. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna. So we can only understand the absolute truth through the process of hearing either from him or from his bona fide representative. Therefore, we had discussed this elaborately. From whom you hear about the absolute truth has to be verified thoroughly before we do so. So, in essence, if you want to cultivate Shraddha, faith, or Manmana, you want to, remember Krishna, the whole process begins with hearing. Then leads to knowledge From hearing, we get knowledge. From knowledge comes faith, and from faith comes remembrance. And there are many examples of it. Just see Prahlad Maharaj. He was in the womb of his mother Kayadu when he heard about the Lord from Narad Muni, and when he took birth, he but naturally was attracted to the Lord. Similarly, Rukmani Devi never met Lord Shri Krishna. She only heard about Lord from Narada Muni, and she developed attraction towards the Lord. Similarly, in the modern times, we have an example of modern day hippies, intoxicants, intoxicated drunkards, and what not they were addicted to. Srila Prabhupada just went and said between of them, among them, chanted the kirtans of the Lord, chanted the holy names of the Lord, spoke about the glories of the Lord, which attracted their mind and consciousness, and gradually they took up to the spiritual culture and they gave up everything. That's the power of hearing from the bona fide sources. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada said, there are so many people these days who speak about Krishna Katha, Aga consciousness. If you really want to test the purity of the speaker, just see how much transformation is able to bring into the consciousness of his listeners. If the listeners are able to really get purified in their consciousness, transformed in their character, then it means there is some substance in the speaker. However, if the crowd is just getting entertained but no transformation, no practical result, then we are wasting our time. It just becomes like the great Indian laughter show, where people go laugh out their belly and that's it, but no transformation. So that's the point. So when a bona fide speaker is there, a transformation is unavoidable. So Arjuna pondered on it. He said, okay, the Lord exists. Fine. But my dear Lord, what do I do? So many times people challenge, show me God. If you show me God, then I would believe. How many of us had an experience where people have challenged, if you can show me God, then I would believe. So with this intention, this kind of a thought came into Arjuna's mind, and that brings us to the second section of chapter 7, where E stands for everywhere. Lord Shri Krishna tells in this chapter, Arjuna, I am present everywhere. I am omnipresent. Everything within and without, I am present. And Lord Shri Krishna begins to say, I am the source of all the material and spiritual energies, Arjuna. Bhumirapo nalo bhayu kamamano buddhirevacha ahankara ityam te binna prakriti rashtra. That is the first verse. Earth, water, fire. If you see this body, the skin, earth, water, I just drank water, fire, the digestive fire, we are walking over 90 degree 0.4 Fahrenheit. Earth, water, fire, air, we breathe in, breathe out, ether, the space between the molecules. This body is nothing but earth, water, fire, ether, and the subtle body is mind, intelligence, Vasika. And Krishna said, Arjuna, this is Prakriti. This is called my inferior energy. And beyond this inferior energy is a superior energy that is called as living entity, the soul within this object of Prakriti. Krishna said, superior, the living entity is a superior energy, and this is inferior energy. And both are my energies. 7.5, Krishna explains this. Uh, my superior energy, which means the jiva, is trying to exploit the inferior, which means unconscious. The living entity is a conscious being, and the prakriti, the matter, is an unconscious entity. The spirit soul, living entity, the super soul accompanies along with every soul. Gross element, earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then there are knowledge acquiring senses like this. Lord Shri Krishna talks about it. So Krishna's energies, which have been described in the fifth and the sixth verse. So Krishna have three prominent energies: Antaranga, Tatashta, Bhairanga Shakti. Antaranga means internal energy, Tatashta means marginal, and Bahiranga means external energy. Text number 5 talks about the marginal. What is Antaranga Shakti, which is further subdivided into Sat, कहते हैं Sandhini, Satchit, Haladini, like that, or Sandhini, Samvit, and Haladini Shakti. These are details. I'll not go much into it. You can always refer the presentation about it. And then there is Tatashta, marginal. which has the potential to be under the shelter of internal energy or to be under the shelter of external energy, soul or jiva. And Bahiranga, the external energy, which is the inferior energy of the Lord, under that comes material world. And then Krishna says there is both gross and subtle, which was described in the 7.4 earth, water, fire, ether, like that. So this jiva is trying to, in the material world, who's present in the material world, is trying to exploit the material energy. That's what Lord Shri Krishna talks about it. And Krishna is the source of origin and dissolution. So the thought that Arjuna had in his mind was, can you show me God? So, how can we really see God who is omnipresent? There are two principles. If anyone ever asks this question, you can put this principle and explain him through this. First is unseen is proven by the seen. For example, remember your good old childhood days. One day, imagine you have come back from school early, and you come back, you put your bag, and then on the dining table, you see your father's car key. As soon as you would see your father's car key, you would certainly remember your father, because you know the car belongs to my father. You've not seen your father, but what would you remember? Your father. So unseen, proven by the seen, you saw the key and you remembered your father because you knew the connection between the car key and the father. One fine morning, Srila Prabhupada was on a morning walk at San Francisco Beach, and there was a beautiful sunrise. And the disciple said, Prabhupada, look, what a beautiful sunrise. Prabhupada looked at the sunrise and said, if the painting is so beautiful, how beautiful must be the painter? So when Prabhupada saw the same sunrise, he didn't just saw the sunrise, he saw the painter, which means he saw the creator behind it, because Prabhupada knew the connection. Prabhupada was educated in that. That's the point. So once we get educated, once we know to whom it belongs to, when we see what we can see, then we understand who we are not even able to see, that that person is present. That's the point here. Unseen is proven by the seen. And therefore, Lord Shri Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7.7, Matah parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protam sutre mani gana iva. O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. Lord Shri Krishna says, Arjuna, I am the maintainer. I am the cause of everything that you see around. Yet I am not visible to the eyes. Why? Just like you see this pulse or the beads, not the pulse, but the beads, they are, there is a neck bead or there is a mala of bead. When a person sees at it, they only see the beads clung together. But an ordinary person would not see a fine thread holding the beads together. Krishna said, I am that fine thread because of which the necklace is prepared. So look at this whole universe. So many planets, so many stars, luminaries are floating in the sky. How is it happening? For us, it seems like automatically or by chance. But Krishna says, no, it's nothing by chance. I am the cause of it. So, first principle was unseen is proven by the seen. So, when you understand the sun, the moon, the planets, and everything is nothing but the Lord's creation. So, when you see it, them, you remember the Lord. When you understand this body is nothing but a gift of the Lord, is made up of the energy that belongs to the Lord, earth, water, fire, ether. When you look at it, you remember the Lord. So, unseen is proven by the seen is the first principle. And the second principle is for every effect, there is a cause. So let's take a look at the second principle. For every effect, there's a cause, means cause and effect. Imagine you're watching a cricket match in a stadium and you kind of doze off. You slept off. It was getting a little boring. And at that point of time, suddenly there was a huge uproar in the stadium. Everyone cheered, and suddenly you woke up and you looked up in the sky, and there was this cricket ball flying out of the stadium, and everyone was screaming, hooray! What a great shot! Now, but obviously, you know that there must be a batsman who must have hit the ball, isn't it? And immediately you look at the pitch and you see who hit it. Who was that batsman who hit such a fantastic shot? This was the effect, and you know there is a cause for it. So, similarly, for everything around us or beyond us, what we're able to perceive, that's an effect. What we're not able to see at times is the cause, but we understand when we see the effect that there must be a cause. For example, let's take a case of it: a satellite flying in the sky. We know that the movement of the satellite in the sky, it's not the satellite has been created by random mixing of the chemicals or the metal and it just came into existence and flew in the sky. No, it's an effect of the hard work of many scientists for a long, long time. And right now, the satellite which is flying in the sky is monitored, controlled by a fellow scientist sitting somewhere in ISRO's lab or the NASA's lab and whatnot. For this tiny satellite, so much manpower is needed to create and maintain. I would like you to see another satellite, another luminary, which is floating in the sky for millions, billions, and trillions of years, known as planet Earth, where we live in. Its speed of revolution is 100,000 times approximately. The speed of rotation on its axis is 16 times that of a shot bullet. As an object which is moving at the speed of 100,000 km per hour, revolving, rotating simultaneously at the speed 16 times that of a bullet, isn't that fantastic? That this such a fast moving object is not being thrown out of the axis and still is in a fixed orbit which is rotating around it. Just to maneuver a little satellite, what is the size, what is the weight of a satellite? The weight of planet Earth is 6 into 10 times 21 metric tons. What is the size of a satellite? It's not even a, you know, it's like an ant towards an elephant. For that, we need so much manpower. So my question is, who do you think is in control of this planet Earth? Could it be NASA controlling it? Or you think there is a possibility of Lord being in control? Well, if you look at from the perspective of logic, it makes all the sense to believe there has to be a God. Because there has to be a controller, and man is not a controller for planet Earth or for any of the luminaries which we found in the sky. So, who is the controller? But a logical conclusion there has to be a supreme Lord for it. Again, coming to the foundational question, can you show me God? So, we discussed two principles: unseen, proven by the seen, cause and effect. And the third thing is, what can you really see? I did my bachelor's in India in electronics and computer engineering, and then went for master's in the same stream in America, which means approximately 6 years I spent studying about electrons, but not even once in my life I saw electrons. And it's not the story with me, it's a story with every student of electrons, because you cannot see electrons. It's a reflection of an element on a cathode ray tube, which is called as an electron. This is what it is. So, what we can really see, until 16th centuries, people were not able to see bacteria because the microscope was not created then. So it was assumed the bacteria don't exist. But not bacteria did not existed. It existed, but we didn't have the ability to see. That's the point. So seeing Krishna everywhere means unseen, proven by the seen, and cause and effect. In conclusion, we can see Krishna everywhere when we understand these two vital principles. And the few key lessons that we learned from this particular section, from the few set of verses that we just saw. The very first is Lord and Jiva are never same, are never equal. Jiva is an energy of the Lord. The sun and the sun planet is never equal to the sunshine. Sunshine is the energy of the sun and is a part and parcel. So those who claim that Jiva becomes God, how is it ever possible? Second, the body, the mind, intelligence, everything which is given to us is large energy. It ought to be used in large service. We cannot use it for our own selfish purpose. That's the point about it. And the third, Krishna is the essence and cause of everything. And to establish that, Krishna in few verses from 8 to 11, he says, I'm the taste of the water, I'm the light of the sun, I'm the ability in the man. Where Krishna further elaborates by giving example how he is the cause of every effect, either the effect in the form of a taste of a water, either the effect in the form of an ability of a man. Krishna is the cause. Now Arjuna began to ponder. He thought, my dear Lord, if you are so omnipresent, if you're the cause of all causes, then why is there still a wholesale denial of you? Why people do not accept you? Why people are not able to see you? How many of you agree is a valid question, isn't it? Krishna says in omnipresent, he's the cause of everything, yet people deny him. So Krishna says, Arjuna, let me tell you the secret. And that brings us to the third section of chapter 7, where A stands for accept or reject from verse number 13 to verse number 19. Here, Lord Shri Krishna speaks on two main subjects. First, about Krishna's magic spell, and second, Krishna does the division of living entity, particularly humans, on the basis of the piety and their knowledge. So, how many of you have seen a magic show? A magician is known for creating illusion. Illusion means the false is shown as a truth, and truth becomes a false. So Krishna says, as soon as a living entity is born into this world, is put into an illusion. What is that illusion? Text number 13. Tribhirgunamair bhaverebhi sarvam idam jagat mohitam nabhijanati mamebhya paramavayam. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance. The whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. So, what is this magic spell of? It's like our vision has been covered by the curtains of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And the more we are covered by it, which means the thicker the cloth, the thicker the covering, to that degree our vision becomes obscure and finally opaque. So, if we have the curtain of goodness, it's hazy. Passion is literally obscure. And with ignorance, is total opaque. You cannot see it at all. Nothing. You cannot see the truth. So Krishna says these three modes of material nature keeps the conditioned soul forgetful of the self and the Supreme Lord. So question comes, how do we get covered by this modes of material nature? As I've already answered, as soon as living entity takes birth, everyone is put into under the spell. Why? The fact is, any one of us, when we were born, who knew about our existence? We didn't even knew I'm a male, female. We didn't know about anything. We didn't even knew who our mother and father is. Nothing we knew. Everything was taught to us. We were born into utter ignorance. So Arjuna was frightened and he pondered, my dear Lord, how can I overcome this illusion? Krishna answers in the 14th verse, the next verse. Devi Shuguna मम माय दुरत्या मामेवाये प्रपद्यन्ते मायामेतां तरन्ति te. Arjuna Krishna said, one who takes shelter of mine is delivered or is relieved from the influence of this magic spell. Why? Because Krishna is the controller of this magic spell and he can wave his hand and take it off. Let me give an example. Imagine your neighbor has you live in a bungalow society, and your neighbor, a bungalow society, you have a house, you have a garden, and your neighbor has a very ferocious dog. Every time you open your door, you open your gate, he will bark at you. You walk outside in the road, outside of the gate of this man, he will bark at you. So you're very frightened. But one day your mother asked you, go and get this particular thing from the neighbor. It's very urgent. Go now, immediately. So you're like, okay, I'll go. You go to the neighbor's house and you're really frightened. You know that this guy has an almost horse-sized dog, huge size dog, and is very, very angry dog. You very slightly open the main gate onto the garden, and you see is the dog around or not. You open it, there is no sound, nothing, and you step inside, nothing. So now you get a kind of a confidence that probably the dog is sleeping. Imagine now you walk across the garden, go to the main door, and you knock on the main door. Tuck, tuck. Just when you make the sound, actually to call the owner of that apartment or the bungalow, suddenly from somewhere that huge dog hears the sound and he comes running into the garden, barking, ferocious, and suddenly he comes to the gate where you're standing and his eyes meets your eye. Your eye meets with his eye, and the dog is angry, is looking at you. How dare you enter into the house of my master, you rogue? You have come to steal. I will devour you. And here this dog is about to jump and pounce on you. and he just makes his action. He prepares his feet to jump on you, and he's like with the mouth wide open. Yeah, he's gonna bite you, and he's about to jump, and you're about to literally lose your life. Suddenly, the master opens the door. He looks at the dog and says, "Tommy, keep quiet." The Tommy goes and sits down on the ground with his tail between his hind legs. Interesting. You, with no might of yours, could have controlled the dog. As soon as the owner came and said, "Tommy, keep quiet." I keep quiet and went and sat in the corner. Similarly, Krishna says, Devi Yeshu Gunamai Mama Maya Duratya. Impossible to overcome it on one's own endeavor. Take shelter of Krishna. So what shelter of Krishna means? Shelter of Krishna means take to this the culture, the spiritual culture. Take to the practice of spiritual culture. Practice live by the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. That's what means taking shelter of Krishna. So shelter of Krishna means becoming part of this spiritual community, spiritual culture, where we do follow this chanting, honoring Krishna prasadam, etc., etc. That's what means taking shelter of Krishna, and like that we can transcend or set oneself free from this illusion. Arjuna thought, "My dear Lord, why are you putting us into so much trouble? We are a stubborn child. We don't know what is good for us, but you know what is good for us. Set us free of this." Krishna said, "Arjuna, I do not interfere in anyone's free will. There are four categories of people according to their piety and knowledge. Either they come to my shelter and they don't come to my shelter. I am equal to all. I'm always available to all. When Vibhishan in Ramayana, it is mentioned, when Vibhishan had come, left Lanka, leaving behind his brother Ravana, who actually had thrown him out of the kingdom for taking side of Lord Ram. When Vibhishan came, flew across the ocean and came to the camp of Lord Ram, everyone was frightened. Oh, he's a brother of our enemy. How can we trust? And Vibhishan came there to take shelter of Lord Ram. At that point of time, Lord Ram heard from everyone, from all the ministers, Sugriva and everyone. Finally, Lord Ram asked, Hanuman, what's your point? And Hanuman said, My dear Lord, when I went, I saw only one person from whose house the chanting of Lord, your name, Ram, Ram was happening, and that is that is our Vibhishan. I believe we can put our faith in Vibhishan. We should. At that point of time, Ramayana mentions Valmiki Ramayana. Lord Ram said a very beautiful point. My dear friends, even at this point of time, what to speak of Vibhishan? He's a saintly man. He never did anything wrong. Even at this point of time, Ravana would come and seek my shelter. I'll forgive him of all his offenses, of all his aparadha. So that's the point. Krishna does not interfere in anyone's free will. Krishna's mercy, the Lord's mercy, is available to every one of us equally. The only thing is, it is we who need to take an initiative. Therefore, Krishna said in the fourth chapter, Ye yatamam arpatyanti tam satayeva janyam. As you surrender, so I reward. So there are four kinds of miscreants who do not surrender. First of them is Mudha, the grossly foolish. Their objective of life is just to work hard like asses without knowing anything about the purpose of life. Second is Nar Adhama, which means the lowest of mankind. They live their life entirely against the Vedic injunctions or against dharma. Third is Maya Aparat Jnana. Aparat is aparan, kidnapping of Jnana. By whom? Maya. So this is the learned class of the society, the scientists, the philosophers, and so forth, like that, who give various reasons to reject the existence of God. Rather, they try to prove God does not exist. And then we have Asuram Bhavam Ashrita, one who is envious of God. And there are three categories of people who can come into this: one who claim themselves to be God, second, who give different reasons for who reject or deny the existence of God, or third, those who say our existence is made up of either of sex life through procreation, or as we are nothing but a bundle of chemicals. And therefore, they discredit this whole creation, our own existence, by just calling us a bundle of chemicals. And of course, they discredit the Supreme Personality Godhead. However, there are four kinds of people who do take shelter of the Lord, to whom Krishna calls as Janas Sukritana Arjuna. They are the pious living entities. So these four pious living entities come to take shelter when they are in need of freedom from distress, artha, freedom or desirous of wealth, artha arthi. Jigyasu, they're curious. They want to know, why am I suffering? What happens after death? Is there life on other planets like that? Is there a God in control? And the fourth is a Jnani, the one who is in the search of the absolute truth. He knows absolute truth is there, but he has not yet got trained in the devotional service, in the bhakti yoga. So these kind of four categories. And finally, Lord Shri Krishna concludes this section where he says, Bahunam Janmanamante Jnanavan Ma Prapatyate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, he was actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very, very rare. In other words, to be able to come to a level of realization where we understand Krishna is a Supreme Personality Godhead is generally not a one lifetime endeavor. We must be, if in case we have come to this level today, must have practiced for a long period of time, or must have searched for the absolute truth for a long period of time, or else the only other alternative is the causeless mercy of the Lord or of the devotees. To help you understand the subject matter, let's take a quick example. Imagine you are a parent and you have seven sons. And the question is, in general, as a parent, you'll be samadarshini, you'll be equal to all. Yet, you would be attracted towards some particular kids naturally. So my question is, when I'm going to list out the seven sons, who would be more dear to you? That's my question. The first son is obedient to you, and he performs his responsibilities very nicely, and you have given him a responsibility to take care of the younger ones. He's the eldest one. Second son is a troublemaker, selfish. He has rejected his parents' obedience to them, rejected them, and actually kind of left them. He says, "I don't have a parents." Third, fourth, and fifth son, he goes and recognizes his parents whenever he's in distress. The fourth son, whenever he needs money, and the fifth son, whenever he has a problem or inquiry to make, he goes and spend time with his parents. The sixth son, his life is dedicated serving Lord. However, he doesn't dedicated serving the parents, but he is not yet trained up, but is committed. However, the seventh son is one whose life is totally dedicated to serving his parents. He is very obedient and sincere and always takes care of his parents, what parents wants him to do. So if you happen to be the fortunate parent, mother or father, or such kind of seven sons or the daughters, who would naturally be the dearmost to you? That's my question to all of you. So what's the answer for it? Who would be the most dear to you? And the obvious answer in this case is the seventh son. Let's see who are these sons. The first son are the Devatas. The second son is the four miscreants. The third to the sixth sons are the four pious souls. And the seventh son is a devotee of the Lord, who is but naturally attached to serving the Lord. And therefore, such a person is dear to the Lord also. So finally, we come to the end of the chapter where Arjuna pondered. Arjuna pondered about what? My dear Lord, what about other devatas such as Brahma, Shiva, etc.? You have been speaking about yourself, but what about them? So, this we come to the last section of chapter 7, where Lord Shri Krishna now begins to speak about devatas. D for demigods, verse number 20 to verse number 30. Here in this section, Lord Shri Krishna establishes the monotheistic stance, which means Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. As I said, all these other personalities and devatas, they are representatives of a particular administrative position. And that's what Krishna is going to establish. The Hindu religion at large is mocked, at large is criticized for the fact that we have 33 crore Devi Devta, such a huge list. You go in the house of any pious Hindu man, you see there, in case that they have a space for the altar, you see all different Ishta Devatas. Father could be a devotee of Shiva, mother could be a devotee of Durga, the daughter could be a devotee of Saraswati, the son could be a devotee of Hanuman, Ram, varieties like this. And therefore, today's generation has become more and more doubtful or restless. They're like, we don't know what to do. Who is God? Much simpler is Christianity and Islam for that reason, where at least they say they have one God. Although they don't describe anything about the Lord, of what they say to be a God of the Lord, they don't know anything about what does their Lord do, how does their Lord looks like. Yet it seems to be attractive and logical to accept one to be a supreme personality than saying there are so many who are supreme. So it's a big misunderstanding that people carry, unfortunately, today because lack of proper spiritual knowledge. But Krishna would establish that. So we'll discuss this last concluding section of 10 verses in a question answer format. The very first question on the subject matter is, why doesn't everyone takes shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Lord Shri Krishna himself answers in the 20th verse of 7th chapter. Because of material desire, such people have lost their intelligence and they want a quick material resource and they worship or approach devatas. Second, why Krishna calls the worshippers of devatas as less intelligent? Krishna says fruits are limited and temporary. Think for a second. You would have heard a lot of stories from the Itihas and Puranas of many great, you know, worshippers of devatas, Brahma and Shiva, where you will find many stories of demons worshipping for certain powers. And would you agree? In many stories where the Ishta Devata is Brahma, Shiva, for that reason, for anyone else except for Vishnu, when these people who were demons, a demoniac mentality, when they worshipped them and they got the boons, they became more demoniac. Yes or no? Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Bhasmasur, many examples are there. Whereas in the worship of Lord Vishnu, not only Lord Vishnu fulfills your material desire, just like a Dhruva Maharaj example is given in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, but worshipping of Lord Shri Vishnu, Krishna, Rama is so, what can I call, you know, in other words, actually it purifies the living entity's heart in such a way, not only you make your this life blissful, you pave a way for eternal living after this lifetime, because the spiritual credits that we earn by worshiping the Supreme Lord are never destroyed. We already saw at the end of the sixth chapter. However, all the material boons given by the devtas, they are limited to the lifetime that we live in. Such people do not understand the supremacy of Krishna. And finally, ultimate result will not lead back to Krishna but to planet God, which means if somebody is a worshipper of some Bhuta, they go to the Bhut planet. You know, somebody is worshipper of Pitras, they go to Pitra Loka. Somebody is a worshipper of Indra, they go and be with Indra. And at the end, when Pralay comes, the time of destruction of the creation, because anything which has a manufacturing date has an expiry date, isn't it? A manufacturing date, what we call as birthday, and then there's an expiry date. Similarly, there is a date of manufacturing for this creation, and indeed an expiry date. And when it expires, when it gets destroyed, all the planets of all the devatas which are within this material world also gets destroyed like that. Question number 3: what's the difference between jivas and devatas, living entities and devatas? The only difference is demigods are or devatas are representatives of Supreme Personality God, administrative representative. Just like a prime minister would have cabinet ministers, right? He has a cabinet ministry where he has different ministers taking care of home security, welfare, etc. So this is appointed by prime minister. That's the point here. So these ministers are highly valued and they are far greater than ordinary citizens. What are the commonalities? But just like they are the citizens of the country, we are. So, which means in the case of ministers and us, is that the truth is same. Whereas Vishnu, his tattva, which we'll discuss in the ninth chapter, is entirely different. The devatas and both the jivas are under the laws of material nature, not beyond it. And for everything of their own, they're dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Lord. They're not independent devatas. What is the problem in approaching devatas for material desires? I've already discussed. First of all, devatas cannot give any desire independently because for every strength, they're dependent on the Lord, ultimately, the Lord Vishnu. Second, the devatas worship is material and cannot transform your life in terms of purify your consciousness. As I said, most of the time it contaminates. Person becomes more greedy. Fifth, how the Lord facilitates demigod worship. Krishna says, I only empower the devatas and I only strengthen the faith of a worshipper on that devatas. Question number 6, what is the understanding of the pure devotee? How does a pure devotee looks at the subject matter of Vishnu and devatas? So a pure devotee never goes to the devatas for fulfillment of their desire. They only take shelter of Krishna in any situation. Like Arjuna took shelter of Krishna, the opposite took shelter. They always depend on the Supreme Lord and satisfied with whatever He provides. And they know that everything comes from the Supreme Lord and does not ask for any material world. Whatever is needed, Krishna nonetheless will provide. When Krishna is taking care of every living entity, the plants, the birds, the beasts, the wild elephants, the tigers, and the bears, and the lions, why wouldn't he take care of us? And one more thing, how does the devotees of the Lord, reciprocate, or what is their outlook towards the devatas? They offer their sincere respect and obediences to all the devatas. They are very, very senior and very, very close associate of the Supreme Personality Godhead because they have been chosen by the Supreme Lord for those administrative role, which manages the affairs of this whole material creation. So, devotee of the Lord is never, never disrespectful. In fact, he goes and only prays to them. He prays to Devatas, my dear Lord, my dear Devi, kindly bless me with the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when we make such a prayer to them, actually, this is what pleases them. They become so happy knowing that finally this man or woman have come to his or her senses. Now they're not asking for any material benefit because anyways it is perishable. They're asking for the ultimate benefit. So devotees have the utmost respect for the devatas, and in one sense, in this understanding, the devatas are worshipable for the devotees. To conclude for today's discussion now, after this, if in case anyone would have any questions, we'll take the questions. First, demigod worship is material, whereas worship of the Supreme Lord is spiritual. Result of demigod worship, are all perishable. But result of devotional service to Krishna is unlimited, eternal. A pure devotee always depends on the Supreme Lord and is satisfied with whatever Krishna gives. To conclude, Krishna is imperishable and supreme. He is unbound and infallible. He knows past, present, and future. Krishna cannot be understood by mental speculation or by simply discussing Vedic literatures. He can be understood only by devotional service, beginning with the chanting of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. With this, we come to the conclusion, 7th chapter, where the acronym for this chapter was HEAD, HEAD. H stands for hearing. Krishna said, if you want to know about me, hear either from me or from the bona fide sources. Then E for everywhere. Krishna says, I'm omnipresent. I'm present all over the creation through my energies. And then A, which refer to, who accepts Krishna's supremacy, who rejects. Therein, Krishna spoke about how every living entity's consciousness is covered by Sattva Gun, Rajagun, Tamagun. That's the reason they're not able to perceive me in this creation. 4 miscreants who do not accept the impious living entities, and the pious living entities who take shelter of the Supreme Personality God. And finally, the relationship between the Lord and the Devtas and the living entities. With this, we concluded our 7th chapter. We come to the conclusion of today's discussion. So when we meet tomorrow, we will be discussing on the topic called as the death, the final call. Please don't look at the date there. I forgot to change the posture. This is the previous time program when we had it. So we'll speak tomorrow on the subject matter of death that way, which is the main subject matter of chapter 8. So with that, we conclude for today. Thank you all for your kind attention and taking out your time on this Saturday evening. Hare Krishna. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we close for today. We'll meet tomorrow, same time, on this YouTube stream, and we'll take the 8th chapter. Hari Hari.